It started with the rattle of the doorknob, sharp and insistent, like a thief testing a lock in the middle of the night. But this wasn't midnight. It was high noon on a Sunday, the smell of fresh cornbread still wafting from our kitchen. My wife's voice trembled as she whispered, "Someone's at the door." I stepped into the hallway and froze when I saw her, the unmistakable bulk of Karen, our HOA president, filling the doorway like an unwanted storm. Her bloated frame pressed against the screen, her pudgy fingers wrapped around the knob, twisting hard as though she had every right to barge inside. Her voice, shrill and cutting, rang through the air. "You think you can ignore HOA notices? You think your family's above the rules? This house is mine to inspect." The audacity of it made my blood run hot. This wasn't the first time Karen had harassed us. She had fined us for flower beds, screamed about the color of our shutters, even called animal control on our old Labrador for barking. But this was a new level of violationer trying to force her way into our home. My wife clutched my arm, her face pale, but before I could even step forward, a shadow moved behind me. My son, James, had returned home from his Marine deployment just a week earlier. He had been quiet since he came back, carrying the weight of what he'd seen overseas. But now, his eyes locked on Karen, and something in him snapped. His jaw tightened, his back straightened, and the soldier in him surged forward. Karen didn't see it coming. She thought she was dealing with the same man she had pushed around for months. Instead, she was about to collide head-on with a Marine who had faced things far darker than her petty tyranny. James swung the door open so fast it slammed against the wall, startling her backward. His voice boomed, sharp as a drill instructor's bark. "Step away from this house. Now." The crowd that had gathered on the cul-de-sac gasped. Phones went up, cameras rolling, as Karen flinched but tried to recover. She puffed out her chest, waving a stack of papers. "Don't you dare talk to me like that. I am the president of this HOA. I have the right to inspect for violations." But James wasn't buying it. He took one step forward, his shadow engulfing her. "The only violation happening is you trespassing on private property. Try another inch, and you'll answer to more than me." Her arrogance faltered, but Karen doubled down. She shoved the papers toward his face. "You're nothing but a child. You think your uniform means anything here? These rules are the law." The crowd buzzed with outrage. James's eyes darkened, but his voice remained calm, steady, like he had been trained to stay in control when everyone else lost their heads. "Lady, the only law that matters right now is the one you're breaking. And if you think a piece of HOA paper gives you the right to put your hands on my family's door, you're dead wrong." And then came the twist. A voice cut through the crowd, low and firm. "He's right." It was Officer Hale, a local cop who had arrived quietly at the edge of the scene. He was also a Marine veteran, a man James had trained under in high school ROTC. He stepped forward, badge gleaming, his eyes locked on Karen. "I've warned you before about pushing boundaries, Karen. But today you crossed into criminal territory. Attempted unlawful entry, harassment, trespassing, and doing it in front of a Marine back from deployment? You just made the dumbest move of your life." Karen's face drained of color. She sputtered, "You can't arrest me. I'm the president. I'm in charge." But Officer Hale shook his head, already calling in backup. "You've mistaken power for privilege, and now you're about to learn the difference." The crowd erupted in murmurs, some clapping, some laughing outright. For once, the queen bee of our neighborhood hive had been stung. James didn't move, didn't flinch, just kept his eyes on her as the officer cuffed her wrists. The look in his eyes said it all. She had awakened something she could never control, and she would regret it for the rest of her life. As the cruiser pulled away with Karen screaming in the back seat, James turned to me, his face calm, his shoulders finally relaxed. "Dad," he said softly, "I've faced worse overseas, but I've never felt better about standing guard than I did today." The crowd cheered, neighbors clapped him on the back, and my wife hugged him tight, tears in her eyes. In one afternoon, Karen's empire of fear collapsed, and my son reminded everyone what real strength looked like. The courthouse buzzed like a hive on the day of Karen's trial. Reporters crowded the steps, microphones flashing as headlines screamed about the HOA president who tried to force her way into a Marine's family home. Inside, the gallery overflowed with neighbors, many of them clutching folded papers, evidence of years of her fines, threats, and harassment. The air felt heavy with anticipation, like everyone was waiting for the first crack of thunder in a long-delayed storm. Karen entered wearing a navy dress and a scowl, her wrists free for now, but her arrogance still clinging to her like a second skin. She glanced around the courtroom, glaring at anyone who dared meet her eyes, as if she could still intimidate them into silence. But this time there was no silence. The murmurs followed her like a wave, neighbors whispering to one another, pointing, shaking their heads. She wasn't the queen bee anymore, she was the villain everyone was ready to see fall. When the trial began, the prosecution wasted no time. They played the footage captured by multiple neighbors' phones. Karen gripping our doorknob, yanking with force, barking orders through her megaphone, her voice shrill as she claimed authority that never existed. Then James appeared on screen, opening the door with a force that made her stumble, his voice steady, commanding her to leave. The gallery broke into soft applause before the judge silenced them with his gavel. Then came the testimony. My wife spoke first, her voice trembling as she described the terror of seeing Karen try to force her way inside, the humiliation of having her family treated like criminals on their own porch. I spoke next, recounting the months of harassment, the bogus fines, the fear Karen instilled in anyone who dared oppose her. But the most powerful testimony came from James. He stood tall, his dress blues pressed sharp, ribbons pinned to his chest. The courtroom hushed as he began. I served overseas. I've stood in places where real authority mattered, where respect meant survival. What Karen did wasn't authority. It was bullying. She thought she could use fear to control my family. But fear doesn't control Marines. And it shouldn't control this community either. His voice rang with quiet power, each word striking like a hammer. Even the judge leaned forward, listening closely. By the time he finished, the jury's faces were set like stone. But the twist came when Officer Hale testified. Not only had he witnessed the confrontation, but he also revealed that Karen had been warned months earlier for overstepping her HOA authority, including filing false police reports against other neighbors. He presented records, each one painting a clearer picture. Karen wasn't just arrogant, she was reckless, dangerous, and fully aware of the boundaries she was crossing. She ignored them anyway. Karen's defense crumbled fast. Her lawyer tried to argue she was acting in the best interest of the neighborhood. But when the prosecutor asked her point-blank if she believed an HOA president had the right to enter someone's private home without consent, her response sealed her fate. She lifted her chin and said, "If they're breaking HOA rules, yes." Gasps rippled through the gallery. The jury exchanged glances. Even her lawyer buried his face in his hands. The verdict came swift, guilty of trespassing, harassment, and attempted unlawful entry. The judge's sentencing was sharp and scalding. You abused your position to terrorize your neighbors. You confused power with privilege. And you attempted to invade the sanctity of a family's home. This court will not tolerate it. He handed down a sentence of 2 years probation, mandatory restitution for damages, removal from all HOA roles permanently, and a restraining order preventing her from coming within 50 feet of our property. Karen collapsed into her chair, mascara streaking, her once smug face now pale and broken. She tried to shout, to insist it was unfair, but the judge banged his gavel until her words were drowned out. Deputies escorted her out, her protests echoing like the final cries of a toppled tyrant. But the true victory came after the trial. The HOA board, stripped of its corrupt leader, dissolved under community vote. In its place, the neighborhood formed a volunteer council, transparent, cooperative, built on actual trust rather than fear. For the first time in years, people planted flowers without fear of fines, kids chalked the sidewalks without being scolded, and block parties returned under twinkling lights and shared laughter. James, once quiet since returning home, became a symbol of that renewal. Neighbors stopped him on the street to thank him, shaking his hand, calling him a hero. He always brushed it off with humility, saying, "I just did what anyone should do." But I knew better. His strength that day, standing firm in the doorway against Karen's storm, gave the entire community the courage to push back. One evening, as the sun set in golden fire over the cul-de-sac, the neighbors gathered on our lawn. Someone had built a small wooden sign, hand-carved with simple words. Here stood the door that ended the reign of fear. James laughed when he saw it, shaking his head, but I caught the glimmer of pride in his eyes. My wife cried softly, her arms around him, finally at peace. Karen had thought twisting our doorknob would break us. Instead, it broke her. She underestimated the strength of a Marine, the resilience of a family, and the unity of a community that had been pushed too far. So I'll leave you with this question. When someone abuses power and crosses the line into people's homes, should probation and removal be enough, or should justice demand even harsher consequences for those who trample on the sanctity of family and community?